Welcome to a brand new show, System Overload, How Change Happens. I'm your host, Kai D. Wright, and I'll steer a conversation between two of the best business strategists to help demystify a subject we encounter daily, yet rarely are taught how to deal with, change. For the next 30 minutes, today's guest will offer case studies and frameworks on a topic facing a widespread reset, leadership and teamwork. I'm joined by Amy C. Edmondson and Michael Kassan. Amy is a professor at Harvard Business School, where she teaches, researches, and writes about leadership and management. She studies teaming, psychological safety, and organizational learning, taking time out of her busy schedule as one of the most influential voices in business. I can't wait to discuss highlights from her many best-selling books and lessons from the dozens of Harvard Business Review articles she's written. Michael Kassan is the CEO of MediaLink, which he founded 20 years ago. He is an influential media broker, architect of partnerships, and transformation advisor. He's a podcast show host, museum board of trustee, and recipient of almost every major industry award in marketing and advertising, including being inducted into the American Advertising Federation's Hall of Fame. Welcome, Amy and Michael.
Thank you, Kai.
Great to be here.
I'm so excited to be able to bring forth a lot of the insights and lessons and principles, nuggets that you both have created and amplified over your illustrious careers. Let's start with an icebreaker. When it comes to breaking barriers that may be related to change, here's my question, and maybe we can start with you, Amy. What's the hardest part of change and why?
I think the hardest part of change is fear. It's fear of the unknown. It's fear of not measuring up to whatever that new system, new standard is going to be.
Yeah. And Michael, any thoughts in terms of what the hardest part of change might be that you've seen or encountered?
Yeah, I think it kind of mirrors Amy's comment, but it's comfort. I'm comfortable in the way I've done things previously. Do I want to become uncomfortable? And again, that manifests itself in many ways, but discomfort of changing is, I think, what people tend to do. You fall back. It's muscle memory, whatever it may be. But it's that, do I want to become uncomfortable? And the answer, generally is probably if change is required, some discomfort is going to be one of the things that comes along with it. But I think you got to hold your nose sometimes and take that dive. So yeah, I would just say another one word answer would be comfort or discomfort.
All right. Well, this conversation is going to hit on those two themes, I'm sure, quite often, between fear and comfort and where the two intersect and how we power through. So Amy, I'd like to start with you, because when it comes to that intersection, you are such a big force in terms of this little term that was coined years ago that has now punctured the pop culture zeitgeist, psychological safety. I did some research and I was digging on Google Trends to see how popular it has been. And it's exponentially exploded since 2015, just double-digit year-over-year growth. So I want to start with you in terms of this question. Why has there been such an increase in the popularity of individuals seeking information about psychological safety?
I think it's related to our core topic here, which is change. I think people are very aware that change is here to stay. Change, as Michael said, is uncomfortable. It does create fear, and it's just become absolutely clear to people that change, disruption, challenge are here to stay. And that makes salient the need for people to ask for help or share crazy ideas or admit a failure, that something hasn't gone well. All of those are quite uncomfortable things to do. They're interpersonally risky. And yet the success of your team and the success of your organizations is utterly dependent on people's willingness to do those things. So that is making psychological safety extremely relevant right now. It also has real relevance for diversity, inclusion, and belonging. If people in your organization, in your team, are to feel a sense of truly being heard, truly having a role to play, truly belonging, the chances are that psychological safety is going to be playing a big role in bringing that about.
Yeah. And one quick follow-up. Are there any key elements, parts, or factors to consider when thinking about psychological safety?
Well, I think one thing to just be very aware of is psychological safety is not the same thing at all as being comfortable or being nice or having all your needs met. Psychological safety is really about becoming comfortable being uncomfortable. It's really about a sense of permission for candor, a sense that it's okay to take interpersonal risks, to speak up, to experiment with things that just might not work out the way you hope that they do.
It's kind of postscript to that. I'd say we all know that oftentimes you learn more from failure than you do from success, and the willingness to take that leap. And, when we're analyzing a company's go to market, for example, they always want to show us the case studies of what they won. And I like to see the case studies of what they lost.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a negative. I'm not the half empty glass guy. I'm the glass is full, but I have an acknowledgement and realization that it may actually be empty, but I don't go halfway on anything. So for me, I look at life through a glass is full, knowing that, as I say, it might be empty. So I want to learn where you failed, not where you succeeded, because it's too easy if it's where you succeeded. So that's always a lesson for me. And I kind of take, Theodore Roosevelt at his word when he wrote that famous passage about the man in the arena. I like the people who get into the arena. Give it a shot. Yes. Go out there, put yourself out there. You never know, but put yourself out there. Go ahead, Amy.
Sorry. I just want to underline that I think most of us, most of the time, because of so many pressures and forces, are playing not to lose rather than playing to win. And playing to win means in the arena, right? Putting yourself out there. And it means you absolutely have to accept the possibility, in fact, the likelihood, that some things will turn into failures and other things will turn into successes. But it's so much better than never trying.
Absolutely.
My dad taught me something when I was young. We moved to California a long time ago. As I like to say, we crossed the plains in a Conestoga. It feels so long ago. But I would go to Las Vegas a lot with my folks when I was young, because we were living in California, and that was an easy vacation spot, because you could drive there in 3 or 4 hours back in the day. And I marveled at the fact that somebody once said, "What's the secret to winning money in Las Vegas?" And the answer was, put a lot of money on the winning numbers and less on the losing numbers. And of course, the answer to that is if only. So you're gonna make those bets. There's no magic to find the winning numbers. You're gonna have to lose some to get there. And the inside joke always was, there is no secret, because that's how they keep building these big hotels, because somebody's winning and somebody's losing at the tables. So there is no secret. That means you got to take a risk. You got to play the odds. You got to take a hunch. I'm not making life like a crap table, but there's some element of life that is a crap table.
Yeah, and Michael.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Michael, those failures that individuals take, those risks, those hunches, right? There is a calculated way of doing it. And I think that is where a lot of Amy's research comes in terms of how do you fail spectacularly? And so Amy, the next
if you're not failing, I think we've already established, if you're not having any failure, you're not trying, right? You're not out there, you're not in the arena. But I think we are culturally quite confused about failure right now. There's sort of one camp that says fail fast, fail often, failure's great, right? And then there's another camp that sort of says, in the real world here, we can't afford to fail. Everything has to go well. Well, they're both partially wrong, right? That in reality, there will be failures, but it is possible to have most of those failures be intelligent failures. And let me define that for you. So an intelligent failure is one in which it takes place in new territory, right? Like Michael was saying, there really isn't a playbook. You can't just look up the right answer and then do that. The only way to get to learn, to progress, to see what happens is to try it. So it's new territory. It's hypothesis driven, meaning you have done your homework. You've tried to think through what's known, what isn't known, what's worth testing. It's in search of an opportunity, like you actually believe there's a valuable goal here that you're advancing toward. And finally, the fourth criterion, which is often missed, is it should be as small as possible. Right? You don't bet everything you have on an uncertain outcome, right? You figure out what's the right size experiment so that I can learn in uncertain territory and then, take the next step. And I call those intelligent failures.
Yeah, you said something that triggered a good anecdotal kind of analogy. It's what we tell marketers about their budgets. We always say 70% of your budget should be on the tried and true, that which 20% should be the things you're pretty sure are going to happen. And 10% should be, we're just throwing, caution to the wind and we're trying new things. And that's the allocation that we recommend marketers go through to put it in the right size. Because if you never try that 10%, you're always going to be buying 30-second commercials while the world is doing something else. So you have to be able to have that pie that you take a slice of, and that slice shouldn't be too big because you need to make sure that the goods and services you're marketing are going to sell. So that's why you need the 70 and the 20. But the 10 is to throw caution to the wind. And as I say, try the things that
it's to innovate, right? So, I think that's the right way to think. I don't know if the numbers are exactly right, but they might be close enough. The right way to think about your life, your career, your leisure time is that there will be, thankfully, some things you do that you really understand, really enjoy, know will go well. And then there'll be some things that are, well, okay, we're not quite sure, but it's safe territory. And then there'll be some where you are genuinely risking, right? You're genuinely in search of an opportunity to get somewhere new and exciting, and you may fall flat on your face sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah, and Amy, let's talk about what happens when someone may be in the process of failure or analyzing failure, because part of it is the commitment of being able to manage different factors that you're both describing, right? The calculated part of it, the known risk, the smart assumptions. What are the causes of failure? Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of how you break down? If all failure is not the same, then are all the causes the same, or kind of what's the landscape look like?
Right. So there are different kinds of, there's sort of, basic failure. You make a mistake, it fails. It was avoidable, but you didn't, right? Then there's complex failure where the perfect storm, a number of things went wrong and you get a bad failure. And then there's the intelligent failures, which happen in innovation and science, especially. But what you see here on this chart is that, in fact, if you look at a failure, a substantial failure of some kind in your life or in your organization, you can imagine, hypothetically, a spectrum of potential causes. And on the far left over here, we have deviance. Someone literally sabotaged the project on purpose. That is obviously blameworthy act. Let's go way over to the other side. And what you see is exploratory testing and hypothesis testing, the work of scientists, the work of innovators since time began. Those are obviously praiseworthy actions. And I won't go through all of the steps in between, but it just gradually gets more and more praiseworthy as we go to the right. And in fact, I would argue from my perspective that truly only deviance or sabotage are blameworthy. But here's the rub. In many organizations, when something goes wrong, we treat it as if it were a blameworthy event, right? We treat it as if it was caused by sabotage, when in fact, it may have been caused by an inadequate process or a task that is simply too challenging to do consistently every single time, or by not having had enough sleep, or by being asked to do something you weren't yet trained to do, right? We always need to do our homework and look carefully at what happened and why, to understand it better so that we can learn from it. but we're so quick often in organizational settings to jump to blame that we end up depressing the play to win instincts, right? We end up depressing people's willingness to take those risks, to go for gold on things that are not yet certain.
Yeah.
Well, and I would add something to this chart. I mean, the chart was great, Amy, and it really brought clarity to the conversation. I look back at failures, and I've had a few. Thankfully, more successes than failures. So, but it's a long game. So the reality is what it is. But there are many things that I've done that worked out badly, and I've looked back and say, would I make that same decision today? And I wasn't as organized as that chart, but there are many decisions that went badly that I say today, based on the same facts that I had then, I would make the same decision. So
Absolutely.
It didn't come from any of those things. It just came from, excuse me, shit happens. It didn't work out. But the decision process that I went through, I would come to the same conclusion, because you don't have the benefit of hindsight if you're making that decision, again. You do in the fake world. In the real world, it wouldn't play out that way. And so that's what I look at and say, that's when I feel better about failure, because I say, at least I know that I ticked all the boxes, so to speak. I wasn't, there wasn't a deviance. There wasn't, inattention, lack of attention. All of those criteria.
And, I use that chart really to make the point that in organizations, I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, the things that go wrong are not due to sabotage, right? They're not due to blameworthy events. But something like 70+% of the time, people at least feel that they're getting treated as if it was caused by a blameworthy event. And what that does is it inhibits innovation. It makes people risk averse in the very era where you want them to be more risk willing, right? More risk tolerant, which means more failure tolerant.
Yeah. This is something that I'm proud of. We've got 3 adult children in their 40s. And I'm proud of the fact that as our kids were growing up, friends would say, gee, to my wife and I, you've done a reasonably good job and your kids feel well-adjusted. And they were normal. Trust me, they weren't robots by any stretch of the imagination. But there were 2 words that we used a lot when people would ask me what was the secret of that. And these are places you learn the real life lessons, as in the real life experiences, obviously. And I said there were 2 words that we used a lot when we talked about how we raised our children. And I look at business the same way as I do my family in terms of the commitment and the considerations you give. And the key word was, we were not judgmental. And I think from a leadership perspective, if you're not judgmental, you can make judgments, but you shouldn't be judgmental. That's how if you're judgmental, you inhibit people's willingness to take that leap. If you just go, hey, you tried it, whatever, and you're not judging the person, I think that's a key phrase. And that's why we created an openness with our kids, because we were able to have them tell us everything. We were the 411 for all the other parents, because the parents would call and say, you and Ronnie will know what's happening with our kids, because you have that relationship with your kids. And that was because our kids felt comfortable sharing with us, because we weren't going to be judgmental. Long way to get there, but and I think that's
Michael. It's true for families. It's true for families and for companies. And in my newest book, which is called Right Kind of Wrong, I talk about in both families and great organizations, they create a culture of blameworthy reporting. Right? Blame-free reporting. Here it is. It is always, you always want to be that family where no questions asked. You call any time of day or night, we'll pick you up or what have you, right? It's exactly we'll talk later. Maybe we'll analyze later some of the, just to learn. You're not here to judge, but to learn. We might analyze later some of the decisions you made. But in good companies, in good families, you want to be the place where it is blame-free reporting. Speak up now, speak up fast. Our job is to learn and move forward into,
and learn together, by the way, and learn together.
Absolutely.
We learn as leaders from our teams, and our teams learn from us. I think it's a reciprocal, relationship. It should be. I mean, I learn a lot from the people with me. So
and we're going to get into talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
teaming and teamwork and that relation of failure and how to analyze it as self versus as team. And so I'd love to talk about that difference. Amy, before we get into teamwork, teaming, and extreme teaming as principles, I know that you are one of the most watched individuals in terms of TED Talks. Your extreme teaming TED Talk, as well as your books, are very well received. Can we start this conversation of analyzing failure, principles of failure, and teamwork by looking at something that we start off with, the comfort zone, and how we get out of it and how we get into performance. So what's the relation between comfort and performance? And are there any other considerations that we should have that will help us grow through a failure?
Sure. So I will start by saying, teaming is here to stay, right? That means working with people with different skills, backgrounds, et cetera, towards challenging goals that you care about. And when you're doing that, I think there's roughly 4 types of environments that you might find yourself working in. And the 4 environments are created by the intersection of psychological safety, right? That feeling of freedom to speak up and take interpersonal risks, and your commitment to high standards, right? The stretch goals that you might commit to. And of course, on the lower left here, we just see the apathy zone, where you feel neither safe nor particularly motivated. And right above that is the comfort zone, where you feel a lot of psychological safety to take interpersonal risks, but not a lot of motivation to really stretch and play to win and go for it. The zone that worries me the most, that keeps me up at night, I call it the anxiety zone. And this is where people are motivated and they care, and they're well-trained in their expertise, but they don't feel able to speak up. They don't feel able to take risks or to ask for help when they're in over their head. And that's a very both difficult and sometimes dangerous work environment. And the upper right, which is where really great, healthy, innovative teaming happens, is what I call the learning zone, where you both feel permission for candor and experimentation and a huge commitment to going for it, to trying really hard and achieving great things with your teammates.
Yeah, and Michael, thinking about some of the factors that may go into successful teamwork, and a lot of the work that you do, you're trying to bring together different types of organizations and different industries, different cultures, right? It may be an agency and a media partner, it may be production partners, but they all have their different ways of working. And so when you think about getting different types of groups of individuals to team and work together, are there any factors that you've seen have worked well? Any conditions that need to be established early?
Well, candor, of course. We do a lot of journeys for companies. We did one this week, actually, with the global leadership of Chanel as a great example. We have the global leadership of Chanel. Now, of course, my wife said, honey, please take that one and trade. But I said the accounting department won't understand that, but I do. But it's a great example, Kai, because what we did was we had a mandate and a brief from the global leadership of Chanel that they wanted to take a journey. And that journey, we coined it a Valleywood journey, because it was to spend time in the Silicon Valley and then time in Hollywood to kind of match up technology and content and understand how, for a global luxury brand like Chanel, and I would think we'd all agree there's only one Chanel, and it stands for something that's unquestionable in terms of luxury and fashion and style and attitude in a good way, and Coco Chanel, just thinking of it. And when we were marrying them, if you will, with the brands and the people they were going to speak to, whether it was the Walt Disney Company or game changers in the industry, folks like Issa Rae and Jessica Alba, and interesting people who've lived both in front of the camera, behind the camera, have been entrepreneurs, we had to make sure that the interests were aligned for those partnerships to be right. The joint feeling of pain. We're a retailer, Chanel. Chanel is a retailer. We're suffering from this kind of structure and stress in direct to consumer, whatever it may be. And you, the Walt Disney Company, have switched to a streaming company for the most part, and you're now dealing with different challenges as how do you maintain your customers. So finding that joint pain point and making sure you're not going to all agree, and there's going to be different solutions for one side or the other, but I think identifying that pain point. And what I like to do in those conversations when we're bringing disparate groups together is I ask my stock question, which is, Amy, what's waking you up at 3 o'clock in the morning? And Kai, what's waking you up at 3 o'clock in the morning? And it's not unusual to find it's the same thing, just from a different perspective. Chanel is interested in commerce, so is Disney, but Disney's interested in content. Well, content and commerce come together now in a way that they never did before. So there's an alignment. So how do we align on that? And then you can have a conversation because you've got shared pain and you're looking for similar resolution. I don't know if that really responds to the question, Kai, but that's how I think when you're bringing disparate voices, teams, partners together, you identify the common areas, and that makes you have a more collaborative conversation.
I think it's a great illustration of teaming with different people along that journey that you described. There was teaming with Disney and people they hadn't met before and then may not even know again in the future. And yet something valuable is exchanged and it really helps them, Chanel, move forward in their journey.
Well, and look, I likened, I don't know if either of you are fans of Curb Your Enthusiasm, but I am. And there was an episode this past season, I think it was last season, where Larry David, in his inimitable fashion, talked about the need at a dinner party for the middler, the person in the middle at the dinner party who's going to start the conversation. Liking that to our industry. Amy, you're in a position where you have to start conversations. And I'm in a position, either self-appointed or anointed in the industry where I have to start conversations. So I identified some words that helped me start conversations, and I wrote them down. So I'm not as prolific an author as you are, God knows, Amy, but I was an English major, so I have a little bit of a head start. And I came up with 10 words that I think touch on all the things we're talking about here. And the 10 words, coincidentally, 5 of them began with the letter T and 5 of them began with the letter C. So I've started to call them MediaLink's T's and C's, and I don't mean terms and conditions, okay? So the T words are trust, transparency, talent, technology, and transformation. And I would submit to you, if you needed to start a conversation in any of our respective worlds, those 5 words would start a conversation and take you for days, because trust, transparency, talent, technology, and transformation. We've probably mentioned several of them already in this chat, and you'll find in most conversations that's true. Let me flip to the C words, and I've used them already, a few of them: content, commerce, culture, creativity, community, and curation. And, I think if you take, and I'm trying to apply that to our conversation, because I was starting a conversation, and here we're in the middle of it, but I think those words are really good thought starters in the how change happens world, because change can't happen if you don't have trust, if you don't have transparency, if you don't have talent. Technology drives a lot of change, and change is about transformation. So there's the T's. And content, what Amy has, produced as an author and as a professor and as a brilliant mind, that's the content. The commerce is obviously what we do with that. The culture, creativity, community, and curation, that we're all in that business. So
absolutely.
Again, apropos of everything we're talking about, and maybe apropos of nothing, I wanted to kind of drop the T's and C's into the conversation, Kai. I hope that's all right.
Perfectly. And, a lot of the individuals watching are looking for frameworks, right? So that's why we like to make sure that we give individuals something concrete that they can use to ground their strategies in. Michael, thank you. I'm going to use that as our wrapping thought. And in terms of T's and C's, we'll be sure to make sure that we amplify exactly what those are back out after this. And I want to end with a closing thought. Maybe we can put up the books from Amy just to reinforce some of the work that she has done over the years. And you can see the landscape of everything that she has written. And it really spans work over a 20-year period. And I just want to make some call outs. Right Kind of Wrong is coming out this fall. I cannot wait to read it and all of the great insights and case studies frameworks that presents. And the latest one, which just came out last week because Amy is always producing new work. She wrote the foreword to Certain Uncertainty. She is ranked as one of the top business influencers in the world in 2021. She was ranked number one. And I have a feeling that she's going to stay in that stratosphere. And so she wrote a foreword that involved 20 individuals that are all global thought leaders that contributed a chapter around how to navigate uncertainty and how to navigate change. And so I highly encourage you to look at that book for everyone that is watching and looking for resources. Amy, I also wrote a chapter in that book, so we're connected in that way. If you want to know about leadership in the creator economy and why executives, entrepreneurs, and employees all need to have a personal brand that can contribute to the growth of an organization, then that's what you can look out for from me. And as we wrap, just want to remind everyone that Michael Kassan, you can tune into his podcast through iHeart, through Apple, through anywhere you get your podcasts and have them download it. And it's called Good Company with Michael Kassan. And so those T's and C's probably is a little taste of that, right, Michael, of all the great things that you'll hear in it. I want to thank you for joining me, Amy and Michael. I really appreciate you giving us your time and insight.
Great pleasure for me. Yeah, and Kai, I appreciate it. Amy, an honor, truly.
It's a pleasure and an honor, both of you.
Thank you so much. You can read a recap of our conversation or replay this episode at adage.com/system overload. Join us for more discussions between senior executives and the best business thinkers in the world to unpack how change happens through system overload. Let's get to work.